it can't be, maybe it is the weather. They're out enjoying this beautiful weather. However, I do know this, we've got the best group here, right?
Right.
Anyway, with all that said and done, if you would stand, I'd ask people to say our prayer. No, I said say the prayer. Okay.
Loving Father, we pause just a moment to ask your blessing on this meeting tonight. What we do and say here, may it help others, may it help us. We pray earnestly for absent members, and we pray earnestly for your soon coming. For Christ's sake, amen.
Amen. All right, Bill, will you lead the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated, please. I have a little story to tell you real quick about the flag. I heard this last night in my truck going home about 8 o'clock. The ACLU has filed suit against a school in New Jersey because the children were saying the pledge to the flag, and they say that was offensive to any Muslims that might be there. I heard that last night on the radio, so I'm telling you where it came from. Well, I don't know if you believe it or not, I'm just telling you what I heard. So,
KFC is not no longer putting out hand sanitizers because it offends the Muslims.
but anyway, that is absolutely ridiculous. I love that flag and what it stands for. I served my time, and Pete, a lot of you have here. But if you still, I don't know, folks, this whole thing is just crazy, isn't it?
What was the state?
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Check it out on your computer when you get home there or whatever. I forget the name of the town, Peggy. I would like to introduce Peggy Cleveland. Do y'all know her?
Yes.
This is Peggy Cleveland, but you're not chairman now of the Democrat. You still chairman? Okay, she is chairman of the Democratic Party. She's a friend of mine, and I certainly welcome here John Huddleston, another Democrat here, so to speak. They want me to tell you they're Democrats, but that's what they are. That's fine. I like to say they are Americans first. That's my take on those things, you well know. So rather than maybe going through our normal little format at first, I don't know if our speaker, he's out of town, but David Vogel is going to be our speaker. He is running for Doug Collins' seat, and I think with that said, Doctor, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you. He can go ahead and give his spiel, whatever it is, 20 minutes, 30, whatever he wants, and then we will have a question and answer. And I've already promised him if anybody gets mean with him, I'll protect him. So, with that said, why don't you come on, just come up here to the front, and you can come right here where I sit, that'll be fine.
Well, for reasons that you will figure out before I'm done today, I am very happy to be here. I am happier to be at Tea Party meetings than any place else. Had a little trouble getting here today. I woke up this morning with some internet problems. My campaign is 100% dependent on that internet working. And I'm starting to get downright paranoid about people working for charter. It's not, well, I won't go into why I'm paranoid about it, but it's really getting bizarre. And the next thing I found myself doing before I got here was teaching some young volunteers how you dig a post hole in rocky soil and dry Georgia red clay. You do it by using a lot of energy with the same old post hole digger. Fortunately, I learned some while back that when I'm campaigning for a day, I should bring a change of clothes. Now, one thing I know as a scientist is that none of us have a perfect grip on the truth. We can only try to get closer to it. And we only get closer to it by being open-minded. And And I will tell you that I have learned more attending Tea Party meetings than I have learned attending Democratic Party meetings. Now, there are some things we have in common right off the bat. I share a genuine fear of government power with you. I think of Snowden as a hero. Not only that, but when I was still a teenager, I learned something about the Central Intelligence Agency that I probably wasn't supposed to know. I don't have time to walk you through all the details, but I will tell you that it was appalling. It was still a time when we thought that J. Edgar Hoover was the man who was saving us from communism. That anybody who was in Congress was the most ethical and moral person we could hope to meet. My first interest in politics was an interest in reality testing. I wanted to find out where power really came from and how it was used. I still don't know all the details, but I know some things I didn't know before, and to help you understand what I know now, I'm going to leave power for a minute, or at least I'm going to seem to. Talk about something else. When I started this campaign, my standard stump speech was about 20 or 25 minutes on wealth inequality. And I don't think we've got a good take on wealth inequality yet. Because we're just looking at how things are now, not where policy is taking us. And I'll tell you to start with, I don't think the famous 1% of richest Americans are a problem. They're just easy to get data on. But I will tell you that they are spiraling down the same drain as the middle class. They just don't know it yet. Now, to help you understand what the real problem is, well, let me tell you first that it's a very small slice at the top of the 1%. The problem is the richest 1/100th of 1% of Americans. It's about 11,500 families. I was calling the super rich. Now, to really understand what the problem is with them, it helps to remember that charitable trust funds are not allowed to reinvest their incomes. They're required by law to spend them. The reason for that is the Republicans and Democrats alike who passed those laws understood compound interest. And if you let a trust fund reinvest its income, eventually it's going to own everything. You might still have a house or car, I suppose, but you'd be renting it from some trust fund if we allowed them to reinvest their incomes. Now, the problem with the richest 1/100th of 1% of Americans is that they have typical incomes in the neighborhood of $100,000 per day. And when you have an income like that, you're not going down to the mall to spend it. You're reinvesting it. Now, for as far back in time as we can look, the super rich have been gaining wealth at a rate of a pretty steady 7.8% a year. Now, again, you kind of doubt any of the numbers that I gave you. I think my data. You can find it on my website. I'll give you a brochure at the end. We'll give you the location of that website. And in my video talks, you won't hear where the evidence comes from. But in the written articles, it will tell you exactly where all the evidence comes from. And it's not from something I got on the internet. It comes from places like the Congressional Budget Office or the Triennial Survey. So we're looking at a 7.8% growth rate That means that their total wealth doubles every 9 years. Now, the total wealth of the United States is also increasing, but it takes 16 years for it to double. So it's simple arithmetic. Right now, they're worth $3 trillion that we know about. In 9 years, it'll be 6. If there's no change in policy or no disaster, 9 years after that, it'll be 12. And then 24, 48, and 96. Game over, they own everything. 5 doubling times, 45 years, possibly less than you thought. What would it be like to live under that kind of financial aristocracy? Well, you can get a pretty good idea, because it's happening to us now. We just don't notice it because we're focused on our debt instead of their wealth. When I was a kid, the University of California was free. Today, students may graduate with $100,000 of debt. That debt is someone else's wealth. We're all pleased because of the recovery of the housing market. Well, recovery for whom? They're not more homeowners, there are fewer. But there are corporations like the Silver Bay Realty Trust that have been buying up houses on the cheap and turning them into rental property. Their investors think they know the future. Today, the median American reaches retirement age worth $87,000. That's not enough to own your own home. So what do? Well, maybe you get a reverse mortgage to cover the house payments and live on $1,200 a month in Social Security. But that reversed mortgage, that sent the last of your wealth to the super rich. And if you think when you die that your house is going to be resold to some private owner, some kid $100,000 in debt, well, you're probably mistaken. It's going to be turned into rental property. We are not far from the day when almost every American will reach in debt and stay that way for the rest of his life. America has already stopped being the land of opportunity. We have less income mobility in the United States than any other developed country in the world. So what do we do about it? Well, none of us in this room are very enthusiastic about raising taxes. And I do not know of any policy that's designed to control the flood of wealth to the super rich that doesn't involve a return to Republican tax policies of the 1950s. It hasn't always been true that the rich get richer while the poor get poorer. From the end of World War II until the 1970s, wealth inequality was stable in the United States. It was stabilized by people who had lived through the Great Depression and understood that the Great Depression was generated in large part by the growth in wealth inequality before that time. And they've established economic policies for this country that would prevent that from happening again. And they were in place until the 1970s. So what were the policy changes? Well, possibly the invention of free trade agreements shipped a lot of our best jobs overseas. And we could argue one way or the other about whether or not crushing the unions was a good idea. But the 800-pound congressman in the room is tax policy. We know that 90% of American families today have less income than they had in 1970, adjusted for inflation. The super rich have 8 times the income they had in 1970, and they pay taxes at 1/4 the rate. Now, I understand the objections to raising taxes on those people with that extraordinary wealth. And some people will say to me, raise taxes on them, that will take away the incentive for entrepreneurs to do the great things they have done for this country. A modern version of those 1950s Republican tax policies would only have high tax rates on that part of your income greater than $1 million a year. And I will tell you the truth. $1 million a year is enough incentive for me. And in fact, it's enough incentive for the CEOs of the 100 largest corporations in Japan, which has the third largest economy in the world after the United States and China. I don't really know why our CEOs need 10 times that incentive. Other people will come and say, well, you can't tax the job creators. The super rich are not creating any jobs. They are sitting on trillions of dollars of uninvested capital because there isn't enough demand for their products. It's demand for products that creates jobs. And if there isn't enough capital to produce the products, then it's the Federal Reserve's job to produce the capital through the banking system. Now, I'm not thrilled with the Federal Reserve. I understand it as well as you do. And I understand that unhappily, with a frozen Congress and with the Federal Reserve being the only institution that can do anything, and with a system that sees to it that the only people sitting on the Federal Reserve Board are representatives of the big banks, and the only mechanism they have for stimulating the economy is to give money to people who are already rich. I understand all of that. But what is the role of the rich people in this kind of situation? Well, it is to get that cheap money, invest it in the corporations, or use the corporations they already own to borrow it, use it to turn a profit, and all they do is collect the profits. They're not putting any skin in the game themselves at all. So, taking a little more money from the super rich is not going to hurt the economy. I also know that people in this room are pretty enthusiastic about the fair tax. And I get the fair tax, but it has a fatal flaw. And we may be able to reach some compromise here, but it has a fatal flaw. And the flaw is that it does not touch that $100,000 per day that the typical members of the super rich are using to reinvest and buy up the wealth of this country. And the only mechanism we have for doing anything about that is tax. If you got another suggestion, I'll take it. But unless you can give me another suggestion, then you have to do what I do, which is swallow hard and do what works. I also hear people say, and I really get this one, there's just something wrong with taking that much money from people who have earned it legally. But you know, we have a legitimate investment in their companies. We're entitled to a share. I mean, we pay for the sewers, the water lines, and the highways, and the police and the fire departments. A whole long list of other things that they depend on and that their businesses utilize. But more important than that, and something we don't say, is that all too often we go to war, and some of us die in defense of capitalism, and we're entitled to a share of this country's wealth. And if laissez-faire capitalism means that all of the wealth goes to 11,500 families, and laissez-faire capitalism needs a leash. I also understand the desire for small government. And you can legitimately ask, what would you do with that money? Well, Lord Eisenhower used it to build the interstate highway system. We might use it to balance the budget and even start to make some payments on the national debt. Amen. Or if we wanted, we could make university education affordable again. But if we couldn't think of anything useful to do with the money, then we should just burn it. Because the one thing we cannot allow in this country is for 11,500 families to do to America what we would not permit a trust fund to do to America. The economics are exactly the same. Now, I want to change topics just a little bit here. I want you to keep in mind all of the money floating to the top. And I want to talk about the Citizens United decision. That was the Supreme Court decision that says corporations have the rights of the people. And if you sit on the board of directors of a corporation, sitting here in this room, you can only give $2,500 to my campaign. Nobody ever has, but that's still the limit for you. If you sit on the board of directors of a corporation, you can give all the money you want to my campaign. You can not only do that, you can give all of your stockholders money that you want to a political campaign, and you don't even have to tell the stockholders about it. You can sit on the board of directors of the American subsidiary of a foreign corporation and spend all the money you want on American elections. Now, I want you to picture that ability of corporations and their owners to spend all the money they want on American elections and all of the money at the top. And we're facing a time when the only political debate in this country will be debate between corporations. We have a word in English for government by corporations. It's called fascism. And we shed a lot of blood in World War II to stop the spread of fascism in Europe. So what do we do here? Well, when I think about power today, I think about the boardrooms of the great corporations in America. And I think of government as a tool. And it's a tool that the corporations have too much control over. But it's not a perfect tool for them yet. There are still people in government, in our Congress, who want to pass a constitutional amendment that would reverse the Citizens United decision. Now, if you've got a congressman who wants to reverse that decision, then it doesn't matter whether you disagree with everything else he has to say. You know that he's on your side because he wants you to have the power. And if you've got a congressman who doesn't want to reverse that decision, you have a congressman who is working to let corporations control your government. Now, if you think anything I've said today is somehow contrary to the Constitution, let me tell you that James Madison himself said it is the duty of government to prevent the immodest accumulation of wealth. Thank you. I'll take questions. We don't have to be confined to economics. Any topics.
I'll start it off. I have two questions for you, and I do ask them in a respectful manner. I'll say that up front. Number one, where do you stand on the Second Amendment, gun control? You can answer that, then I'll follow up with that.
Okay. I grew up hand loading a .22 250 Wagner. To this day, I can look at the action of a well-built gun, and it's an object of duty to me. I'm enough of an engineer to think that way. I also understand why people who live in South Chicago don't like guns. And I think that people like myself who do like them can reach a compromise with them. there's also an issue of manners. And that you ought not bring an AK-47 to a place where guns are not expected and where people don't know you. People have a natural, guns are dangerous. People have a right to be afraid of them. You really shouldn't make people afraid of them. And doing that is the one thing that could get the population of this country turned enough against people who like guns to actually change Congress's mind about whether or not you should have them. I don't think anybody needs to fear Congress wanting to take your guns away. The blood type of Congress right now is NRA. They get it. And I don't think you need to worry about that. And I think you can make a reasonable compromise with people who do live in dangerous places.
Okay, what has Doug Collins either done or not done that makes you want to run against him?
Doug Collins takes pride, brags about having been voted by his colleagues in the House the most conservative member of Congress. And his no vote, his record of voting no, does make him one of the people who is most responsible for the paralysis that we see in Washington. We get really angry at government. I do too. But it's never a good idea to make a decision about anything when you are angry. It was not a good idea to close down the government. It was not a good idea on a lot of levels. It cost our economy $5 billion a day while it was closed. And you know, we complain about government not doing things right, about government not being able to do anything. But, you know, when the government was closed down, the Centers for Disease Control was closed down. And what if the Ebola epidemic had shown up while the CDC was closed down? We wouldn't be having this meeting today because a lot of us would be dead. Government does do important things. We shouldn't just willy-nilly close it down. You know, the idea of threatening to close it down over not paying a debt that you've already agreed to acquire. I mean, none of it, I don't imagine any of us in this room are people who would welch on our debt. We ought to turn around and say, well, yes, our government ought to welch on its debt. No, it agreed to those debts. And once you've agreed to the debts, you pay them. Not to mention what it would do to the world economy for the government to actually welch on its debt. And that vote against raising the debt limit, that's not acceptable. We can't govern out of anger.
How do you feel about all this immigration stuff?
Immigration. That's really a long answer. I'll try to make it short. We have immediate problems, midterm problems, long-term problems with immigration, all of them. Let's start with the immediate problem. The immediate problem is all the unaccompanied minors who are coming across the border. Now, in 2008, the Republicans passed what I agree with was an ethical approach to unaccompanied minors coming across the border. And now that they are coming as a flood of refugees, we don't want to do that anymore. Now, before we go any further, I'd like you to think about the last time you read about a refugee crisis in some other country. What did you feel the other country should do about that refugee crisis? this is, the kids coming across the border, this is a refugee crisis. There aren't parents anywhere who would send their children alone on that kind of travel. Just to get them across this border. Whether you agree with that or not, here is the solution to it. Right now, we have a backlog of 360,000 cases in the immigration courts. And we are treating those cases at a rate of 1,000 a day, which means we have almost exactly a year's backlog. And it'll be a year before we start sending any of those kids back to show the people back home that we really aren't taking them all. That we really are evaluating who is in danger if we do send them back home. And the rest of them, they're going back home. But it's going to take a year to show people back home that that's what's happening. In terms of the budget of the United States, it would be absolutely trivial to double the number of judges and lawyers working on immigration cases. And we could clear that backlog up in 6 months. And we could be sending the children back. Those who are not genuine refugees. That's the first thing we ought to be doing. The other thing is we need to be explaining to people in Central America that we're not going to take any child they send up here. I can remember in Vietnam when we leafleted the whole country with B-52s. Now, we are doing some things on their television system to try to explain that to them, but we could be doing a much better job of it. So you may think I'm a little bit too soft-hearted when I first started talking about a refugee crisis, but I think it is a problem that's soluble and we ought to just be doing it. Farther down the road, we still have the problem of something in the neighborhood of 11 million illegal immigrants in the United States. And I don't mind calling most of them illegal immigrants, though some of my colleagues would prefer it if I call them undocumented workers. Now, there is a difference. There's a difference between some kid who came here when he was 3 years old and has been living here for 15 years, and immigration wants to send him back home now. I think, I support the dream. I think people who arrived here through no fault of their own and grown up here, we ought to allow them to stay. For the rest, what do we do? Well, the first thing everybody talks about is needing to shut down the border. But nobody talks about how we do that. We've started building a physical fence. It went so far over budget that we gave up on it. We started building an electronic fence. It went so far over budget that we gave up on it. Well, it cost us to build a Berlin Wall across the Mexican border. And if we do, does the flood of not refugees now, the flood of illegal immigrants just go around and come in at the two coasts, or through Canada, or through tunnels, or what is the technology required to close down the border? There are 350 million legal crossings of the border between Mexico and the United States every year. And embedded in those, I have no idea how many illegal crossings there are right through our border patrol units. I mean, we already employ 20,000 border patrol agents. Is it really possible to close down the border? Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I haven't talked enough with the technologists to know whether or not it's what it would cost us. Would it cost us closing down those 350 million legal crossings a year, actually having something physical like a Berlin Wall up for 3,000 miles? And would it be worth going there? I don't know. So if we can't close down the border, what are our other possibilities? Maybe we can close down work opportunities, but I need to know more than what I know now, and know how to do that. So my answer to your question is that at this point, I am in large part not able to answer your question because I don't know the answer. But the people who keep hollering for closing the border do not know the answer either. Now, I don't know what to do with 11 million illegal immigrants. I don't think we have the ability to chase them out either. You know, 360,000 cases have jammed up our immigration legal service, so there's got a year's backlog. What's 11 million of them going to do? I don't know what the solution is. I'd be willing to hear anybody's suggestions that aren't obviously just cruel. But I think we need a solution that involves making home more attractive to people who live in Central America. You know, excuse me for taking so long with this. I'm still going to wander off in two other directions. But I know right now, Cuba has more influence in Central and South America than we do. And they have that in large part because Cuba has 22,000 physicians working there. That makes Cuba very popular. We could be doing more. We could do more for countries than just give them money to spend on our arms industry and buying weapons. We could change our drug policies so that their economies would be less damaged by the drug cartels that we helped create with our drug policies. We could be direct help to their economies, both in terms of loans to businessmen and advice. And we could help their economies by helping them root out corruption. There are 1,000 ways that we could help those economies, and we aren't doing it. You know, sending teams of kids in their early 20s down there to help them with the sewer project, that isn't what they need. They need real economic help. So that people are not driven to come here, because I honestly don't know that we can stop it. Even if we take the idea that we're just going to shoot them coming across them, I don't know that we can stop it. Sorry to take so long with that.
Okay, folks, asking some more questions.
There's one down there.
I'm a little concerned about the Democratic Party, the way they're treating veterans at this point. And I find that two of the top people in the Democratic Party, one comes out and says, do not arm veterans because they're not responsible, and do not arm the women because they're pretty stupid and don't know how to handle guns. Now these two leaders in the Democratic Party have come out and openly said this. What is your response to something like that?
Well, I would personally diss some of those comments. But I will tell you that in terms of actual laws passed, do we have a copy of that piece I wrote on veterans?
The one on
No. I will try to get it for you. On one side, it indicates all the things that the Democrats Democrats have been able to pass in spite of Republican opposition. And on the other side, it lists all the things that have been blocked by Republican opposition. And I can tell you that if you're a veteran, one thing I understand is that when we start a war, the war isn't paid for until the last veteran is gone. Let me give you some examples, and just the ones that I can happen to remember off this very long list. 6 months ago, Democrats tried to pass better funding for the Veterans Administration hospitals. It was blocked by Republicans. 3 months later, there was a big scandal in the VA. That scandal forced Republicans to vote for that same bill. It passed. And today, Doug Collins is trying to take credit for passing that bill. The Democrats had a bill that would have done nothing except instruct the VA to include on its website a list of ways of financing education for veterans. And the Republicans blocked it. It was just a list to put on their website. There have been efforts by Democrats to see to it that veterans actually can go to college at no expense to themselves. Republicans blocked it. The list is long. I'll try to get it to you before I leave here today. I think I have a copy of it in my car.
Could it be when those Republicans blocked those attempts, or the Democrats, whatever the case may be, is because other items that were tagged onto it that were
No, these were one-up bills that were partisan.
one of something else? And the 11 million across the board each year?
Well, there are 350 million legal crossings across the board.
Okay.
I think there are 11 million illegal aliens in the United States.
How many of those do you guess would be persons that want to do serious harm to this country and the people that are in it? You know we're facing another crisis.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's kind of a separate issue.
You're right amongst the people coming across. How do you know who's who?
I think that what we're most concerned about, though, is them getting, I think most of the people who would come here with the intention of doing us harm will be able to figure out how to come here with their parents and do that.
They didn't seem to have any problem doing that on my own.
That's right. And they will continue to come that way if they come along. But let me ask you, to clarify your question here. Is your question about what we do now about ISIS, or is it about closing down the illegal trafficking in and out of the United States? I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's, as part of ISIS is closing down the illegal traffic, or at least stopping the people and getting some personal information.
I think that stopping Middle Eastern terrorists from coming here. And we've been obviously been fairly effective at it since 9/11. We've not had anything like that happen since. To be certain that we don't let anybody like that in would require shutting down the legal movement between the United States and the rest of the world. And that would be very expensive to us.
How would that be? What if everybody had a passport?
Everybody has to have a passport.
That's what I'm saying. So why would that affect the legal people? They've got to show their passport to get in the country. There's no reason to stop them.
Oh, well, terrorists will get legal passports.
Well, that's possible, yeah. But the people who are showing up now and have nothing, You gotta pretty much assume that they're illegal.
We're not going to have terrorists coming in that illegal route. They're going to be coming up here under the illegal.
That's not what ISIS says.
Now, just a second here. You have me in an impossible place here, but I want to hear our specific suggestions about what we should do. And I will give a thumbs up or thumbs down to those specific suggestions. But just a vague, what are we doing about that?
Borders shouldn't be porous. They should be stopped at the border.
And I think it's
And whoever wants to cross it that doesn't have a passport or legal.
Oh, we already stopped anybody. Just a second. The people you have to be afraid of are coming with legal passports. They'll come anyway.
ISIS with legal passports.
They'll have legal passports. They won't risk coming in illegally and getting caught. I mean, Lord, right now we catch 70% of the people coming across the border illegally and send them back. The terrorists aren't going to take a chance of coming through that way. They're going to come through with legal passports.
What if the people who are trying to get here in that manner knew that they weren't going to be welcomed and fed and clothed and raised and gone to school and all that? What if they knew that that was not an option? Would they still come?
Well, probably not.
Yeah, very simple.
But how do you stop that from happening?
Change the government.
But no, just what government policy? It's a government policy that has to change, and I want to know what it is. I'm willing to listen. I mean, it's very simple to shout, close the border. It's very simple to say, don't give them any benefits.
Right.
But you have to explain to me how we do those things if you want them done.
You don't get it.
Don't do it.
You get it.
And you have to go back.
Okay, if you're illegal now, you don't get any benefits. It doesn't work. If you're illegal now, you don't get any benefits. You live in that under economy where people get paid in cash on the side.
You catch them, you send them home.
If we catch them, we do send them home.
They get sick, they
Problem
get
is
sick, they go, they get taken care of.
But why would we send more home than anybody else?
I know the government's not going to do this, but give the veterans back let the veterans keep their guns. Yeah. And if anybody messes around, send them on their way with a bullet through their head. That's the quickest way to get rid of the whole, it solves the whole mess.
I know of no law, nothing the government's
I
going to
know
keep
no-
veterans from having guns. But I wonder about, never mind, about somebody who's suggesting that we shoot them in the head and send them back.
I think it's a good idea. So,
Yes.
I'm going to take you to a different topic.
Okay, thank you.
In your talk, you spoke of taxing the very, very wealthy and taxing their income. And one of my concerns with our current income tax system is that it regularly gets modified, I would say annually or biannually by Congress, to meet whatever needs or wants that the politicians had that year. Whereas when I look at the fair tax, I see a sales tax type thing that we all pay. So if we stay with an income tax system, and we would have to do that to tax the income of the very wealthy, how would we go about putting it in place where, for lack of a better word, Congress can't muck with it every year?
I'm open to a lot of suggestions about that. I would even be open to something that was basically a fair tax with an additional tax on incomes above $1 million. I would probably prefer a graduated income tax if we could get it cleaned up enough so that there wouldn't be the kinds of loopholes you're talking about. And I will tell you that those loopholes, I'm well aware of those loopholes being everywhere. I've taken advantage of them myself. When I was working in the Caribbean, okay, the deal was that I didn't have to pay income tax in the United States because my tax home was in the Caribbean where I was being paid. I was being paid not by a company in the United States, but by a company in the Caribbean whose only reason for existence was to pay me for this company that earned all of its income, had all of its income shipped back to the United States from where I was working in the Caribbean. But where I was working in the Caribbean, the deal was that I was in that tax home, and the corporation had worked things out so that my tax rate was 0. And in exchange for that, the corporation didn't build any student housing. So the people in the Caribbean got to take full advantage of all the students who were going there. I thought it was completely corrupt. It was corrupt. It was worse than that. I did have a little bit of investment income in the United States, and it was taxed as though that investment income was all the income I had. The tax code is corrupt. I'll give you that in a second. I would love to straighten it out, get all those things out. And it would probably simplify it a good deal to do it.
Do you really think that there's one man voting the way you do your audience is very good? Do you really think you can push it through? As one man?
As one man?
Pushing it through?
No, as one man I can't do that. But you at least know where I would stand on these things. Let me tell you something I think one person might be able to do. In Botswana, there is one member of parliament who managed to establish an educational program for parliament to teach the members of parliament how to evaluate evidence with regard to policy. And he actually succeeded in doing that. And by now, 80% of the members of parliament in Botswana have learned a lot more than they ever knew before about how to produce and evaluate evidence-based policy. That's something I would try to do.
Got it, folks. Any questions?
Thank you all for
All right,
your time. Let me say this. It is people who care about these issues that give my grandchildren a chance. Thank you.
Everybody get a chance to read the minutes of the last meeting?
Yep.
Okay, we would entertain a motion to accept the minutes. Got a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We have a copy of our treasurer's report. Would you like to maybe just recap it real quick?
Well, so right now, we have a balance of $1,560.12. That was after donations and memberships of $88, and we paid Chamber of Commerce $75, and paid Debbie Nichols another $15.14 for supplies and food, for all the food. So we have $1,516.12.
And I think all of us know what the little teapot for. I will just remind you that as you walk out. And we would entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? You know, we had Debbie, you want to stand up about our membership?
Well, we haven't decided yet when our membership's coming in. We talked about that.
Well, no, it's going to be on an annual basis. Did we not decide
But
that?
whether or not Ken person joins, and that.
I'll tell you what, we've only got about a third of our members here tonight. I don't know have any, new business?
Go to the bylaws, sometime they get committees together, bylaws, and then memberships.
Let's make sure our regular members are back first. I think we're all the way on that, don't you, John? I mean, we don't have anybody here hardly. I mean, what do we got? We're the best. I've already said that up front, remember?
Once a year.
But, we want more people here than this, make a decision. We have any new business, old business, anything else we need to talk about? No. Anybody, we always give everybody an opportunity. Anybody like to stand up and say anything you want to say? Pete?
I just want to tell you that in November of 2012, my children, my daughter, had a house fire. It burned out the bottom part of the house. And we've been trying for 2 years almost to get the insurance company to do something. And they didn't. They wouldn't even return phone calls. I wrote to the commissioner, the insurance commissioner. That writing was useless. He wrote back and said, let the lawyers fight it out. In other words, what happens, the lawyers get rich, and the kids still don't get their house fixed. So I talked to Wayne Bishop. He said, talk to Senator Gooch. So I said, go ahead and talk to him. I didn't even know that he was in town. Lynn did. Within a week, we had a check. Your representative, no, your representative out this, Senator Gooch, Senator Isaacson, I don't know whether Isaacson got involved too, I think he probably did. But I wrote to these people and told them, you know, what the hell is going on here? I said, these kids are 2 years. They paid their taxes, they paid the mortgage. They raised the taxes and mortgage, by the way, during this time. They lived in they couldn't live in the house, it's covered in mold. Gooch or somebody, I guess it was probably Gooch, got us the satisfaction. And the kids have got a check and they're going to fix their house. Praise the Lord. Thank God for politicians. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just want to invite everybody to the county commission meetings. And there's a running joke in the county now where they're the best free entertainment in town.
True, amen.
And you know, maybe as officer of the Tea Party, I shouldn't be saying things like that, but when I go to a regular county commission meeting now and I see 60 or 70 other people in that room, I know we have a community that cares. And that says leaps to the 3 commissioners sitting at that head table when there are 60, 70 people turning up for every commission meeting. So come join at the commission meetings. There's one thing in my short term of activity in politics, or not in politics, but in participating with the Tea Party, that I've learned that all politics is local. I mean, we have a candidate for the United States Congress sitting here, and he may be going to Washington, but he's here tonight because he understands the exact same thing, that all politics are local. And we're not going to change what happens in D.C. We're not going to change what happens in Atlanta. But we have a say of what happens here. And if we can change what happens here, that's going to trickle up to Atlanta, and that's going to trickle up to D.C. And take it from me, folks, I used to live in the D.C. metro area. That is one pickled up city. I mean, it's terrible. My brothers are still farming just north of D.C. And the regulations that are imposed on them as farmers in that area are incredible. And they can't move farm equipment on the county roads anymore because most of the farms up there grow houses now. And, you know, it's suburban D.C. And I'll tell you how rural it was when I was a kid. The farm that I grew up on up there was a 1-hour drive to the White House. I went to a one-room school. and that was in the 50s. I mean, I'm not all that old. But politics are local. It all starts with meetings like this in counties like ours all over the United States. We can change what happens in D.C. if we change what happens here. So start by coming to political people. I'm sure that Peggy and the Democratic Party here in Fannin County would love to have some of us come visit your party meetings.
We certainly will, anytime.
And we certainly appreciate y'all coming this evening.
Amen.
And we certainly appreciate Dr. Vogel coming this evening and speaking to us.
You also got to realize the Tea Party does not back a party.
Right.
Yeah,
Everybody
we're kind of an
involved.
independent crowd.
That's-
Taxed
Everybody
enough
thinks we
already.
are Republican. We're
Is
not.
anybody not taxed enough already?
But it starts here. It starts in meetings like this. We can change Washington, but it's got to start in a meeting like this. That's my spiel for tonight, Carolyn.
Don't faint. I agree with everything you said.
Me too. But we're taxed enough already.
Well, like I said, tomorrow, at Pools Barbecue in LJ, Dave Purdue's gonna be there, and if anybody wants to get out, go say hi, wish him well. It'll be in the afternoons.
You hear what she said?
No.
David Purdue's gonna be at Pools Barbecue in LJ tomorrow evening, I think it's at 5 o'clock.
David Purdue's gonna be at Pooh's Barbecue. I know you can hear my big mouth. Other than that, anyone else got anything to say?
Oh, one more thing. I'm sorry, one more thing. October the 7th, Jack Smith is getting a bus together to go listen to the debates in Perry. And so if anybody's interested, I have Jack's number if you want to call him, get on that bus.
Who's debating?
The governor's race and the Senate race, and Michelle Nunn and David Perdue.
Will the Libertarian candidates be
Yes,
there?
that'll be there also.
John, you normally make a report on our government. You got anything, either city, county, and or state, and or federal?
I am not up to speed on federal. As a matter of fact, our person that does federal is probably still in Alaska, is she not?
Yes, she is. What should be told? Back in a week.
Back in a week, so there we go. State's been quiet because the legislature's not in session. The legislative session will start in January and run through the end of March or early April. So there'll be a lot of activity during those 4 meetings from the state side. I did see a poll the other day that I found kind of interesting in the gubernatorial race here, where the Libertarian candidate was polling at 13 to 14%, which I thought was incredibly high. But we'll know after November 6th, 7th, whatever day the election day is. As far as county goes, there's really not much that's changed in the county. I think everybody's read in the paper that Kubota Leasing has sued the county because we reneged on the lease. It's my understanding that that's been turned over to the ACCG attorneys. I'm still fighting to get some kind of procedure in place for the Board of Commissioners to buy diesel fuel that's not illegal. Because A, we need diesel fuel, and the way our local legislation is written, it's very difficult for the Board of Commissioners to buy it legally. And I can't think of anything else that's happened at commission meetings that's kind of newsworthy. But I do encourage everybody to come out, if for no other reason, to hear me and Bill Simon spar with each other. I'm not the spokesman for that group, and Joe is not here. There is a committee in town, and I'm on it. Walt and Deb are on it. Elaine and Jim are on it. Charles, who I don't see tonight. And I will extend the invitation to anybody here that wants to come. Am I correct in extending that invitation? The meetings are held on Wednesday night at 6 o'clock at the Fannin Sentinel office. And it's a group of citizens that are pulling together and modifying our existing local legislation and just bringing it up to speed. Because the bulk of what we're governing our county under now is written in the 70s. And I remember the 70s, and I was a much younger man then, so it's been a while since we've touched these. And I may be one of the few that remember the 70s. But, and we've made a lot of headway, we've made several changes, and we as a group think we've made changes that are headed in a better direction. But if you're interested in joining us in those meetings, they're Wednesday night in Elaine's office, Elaine and Jim's office.
At what time, John?
6 o'clock.
6 to 8.
6 to 8. And Joe Webb runs the meeting, and we start pretty much dead on 6 o'clock, and we wrap it up pretty much at 8.
The lights turn off. And the lights turn off at 8:10.
Yeah, because Elaine and Jim go home because neither one of them had any sleep tonight.
Is that every Wednesday?
Yeah, it'll be at least, what do we decide, at least 3 more meetings, maybe 4 more meetings. So we're about done with the rewrite, and we're getting to the point where we're putting it all down on paper. And we will review the final copy and then start presenting it to the commissioners.
The commissioners have promised that they want to review it before it's presented, each one separately.
So now, what I hope I haven't done is stepped on Joe Webb's toes, because we did appoint him the public information officer for the group, but he's not here, so.
Something you might do on your little handout sheet here too, we've got a list of all activities going on and will go on in the future. You might read this, but you may find some that you may be interested in and you want to attend. I think it's a great list. Now, the group you're talking about, though, I don't see it listed on here. Maybe you could list it next time, then.
It is.
But it was announced at the commission meeting.
Right, but I'm saying let's just start maybe putting it on our list too, because we try to, all we're doing, folks, is trying to keep the citizens informed of what's going on around here in Atlanta and Washington, D.C. Anyone else? If not, we will stand adjourned by acclamation. Doctor, how about, I'll give you this, you might